When the wedding invitation arrived, it was addressed to Miss Vanessa Carter, printed in embossed gold, wrapped in ivory paper, thick enough to feel expensive. But the moment I held it, I knew. It wasn't really an invitation. It was a summons, a performance, a role they needed filled. I hadn't spoken to my parents in nearly 4 months. Our last conversation ended with my mother sighing. "You've always made things harder than they needed to be." That was after I declined their suggestion. No, their expectation that I lend my penthouse for my brother's honeymoon photo shoot. I paid for that penthouse, every square inch of it. I designed it. I built it metaphorically and literally. The down payment came from a bonus check I earned while working 16-hour days, leading a product team no one believed in. That home was my sanctuary, my symbol of escape, of self-made peace. But to them it was an asset waiting to be repurposed. For someone worthier, someone like James the golden boy, 4 years younger, smiled like a politician, got a job in our uncle's firm straight out of college, had his hand held through every failure, every misstep. My parents praised him for things I'd never been allowed to even try. He crashed a car at 21. Dad paid for the repairs. He got caught cheating on his girlfriend. Mom said boys will be boys. He quit 2 jobs in 2 years. They called it soul-searching. Meanwhile, I bought my first car in cash, paid off my own student loans, and closed 3 major software contracts before 30. And still at every family dinner, I was the one asked if I was seeing anyone serious yet. So when James announced his engagement, the whole family glowed with pride. My parents started planning like they were royalty marrying off a crown prince. There was talk of elevated elegance, old money ambience, and symbolic spaces. That's when they looked to me, and to the penthouse. The suggestion started subtle, a joke at brunch. "Wouldn't it be lovely if James and Emily had their wedding photos at your place?" Then a hint. "You're not even using the guest room right now, are you?" Then pressure. "You wouldn't let your brother start his new life in a tiny apartment. Not when you have space." I declined, politely at first, then firmly, then completely. What followed was the kind of cold I'd learned to expect: the silence, the avoidance, the twisting of facts in group chats I wasn't included in. Then came the wedding invitation, glittering ornate, and utterly hollow. Still, I RSVP'd yes, not because I wanted to be there, but because part of me still wanted to believe I could exist in that space without losing myself, that I could walk into that ballroom and be seen not as a disappointment or a resource, but simply as me. I spent 2 weeks preparing, dress tailored, hair styled, face calm. But as I drove to the venue that day, something inside me knew. This wasn't going to be a celebration. It was going to be a test. And I was going to fail, or finally stop playing along. The venue was grand, the kind of place with chandeliers that looked like they'd cost more than my first year's salary. Waiters floated by with trays of champagne and tiny hors d'oeuvres I couldn't pronounce. Everyone wore smiles like masks, all white teeth and brittle laughter. I arrived alone, of course. And that apparently was a problem. "Still no +1, my aunt whispered with a smirk, adjusting her pearls. I smiled, tightly. "Still no personality." I almost replied, but didn't. There were dozens of tables, but no one seemed to know where I was seated. I wandered for a bit until a distant cousin pointed me to a spot near the edge, far from the family table, like I was part of the event, but not the story. My mother waved me over briefly. Air kissed my cheek without actually touching it. "You look polished," she said. "Don't go too bold with the lipstick next time. The cameras might catch it. The cameras, always the optics, never the truth." I watched as my brother basked in attention. His fiancée, Emily, was sweet in that curated smiling way that made you wonder what she looked like when no one was watching. To their credit, they seemed genuinely happy. Maybe that's what stung the most. No one asked me how my business was going. No one brought up the grant I just received from the city. But everyone asked if I was dating yet, or why I still lived alone in that big place. I kept smiling, nodded through conversations I wasn't a part of. And then I heard it. Low voices, behind the tent near the catering entrance. My parents, whispering. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but I couldn't help it. My name always triggers attention. "She won't say no if we ask in front of people," my father was saying. "It's family. She won't make a scene." "James needs a proper foundation," my mother added. "He's starting a family. That penthouse is too much for one person anyway. She'll understand. It's her duty, really. They were talking about my home, my life, like it was a decorative cake topper they could just move from one table to another. I stepped back, the sound of their words echoing like thunder in my chest. They weren't just hoping I'd offer. They were planning to corner me. Back inside, the lights dimmed for the toast. My father stood with a glass of champagne, his voice booming across the room. Today is not just about love, he said, pausing for effect. It's about family, about support, about stepping up for each other. I felt every cell in my body tighten, and so I want to take a moment. He continued to recognize my daughter, Vanessa. Heads turned, forks paused. I smiled, cautiously. Vanessa has a beautiful home in the city, he said, grinning wide, and she's graciously agreed I stood up before he could finish. No, I said, firm, clear, loud, dead silence. The kind of silence that stretches across tablecloths and clenched jaws. I never agreed to that. He looked at me like I had slapped him, but I hadn't. Not yet. I stood there still in heels, still in control. All eyes were on me. The room was frozen. $1,000 string quartet had faded to silence. My father's face shifted, first pale, then red, then something in between like shame and fury, wrestling for space. Vanessa, he said through gritted teeth, this is neither the time nor the place. No, I replied, keeping my voice even. It's exactly the time and place because you tried to use the room to trap me. Murmurs rippled through the tables. My mother stood half a step behind him, stiff and unmoving. He blinked at me, lips twitching. This is your brother's wedding, he said sharply. Don't make it about you. I smiled, thin and tired. Then maybe you shouldn't have tried to announce that I was giving away my home without asking me. Someone near the back gasped, and that's when it happened. He crossed the room, fast, with the stiffness of a man used to being obeyed. Before I could react, before the silence could split, he raised his hand and struck me, right there, in the middle of a wedding hall, lit by chandeliers dressed in champagne linens and rented perfection. He slapped his daughter across the face. The room shattered. Aunt Linda dropped her wine glass. Someone stood up so hard their chair scraped the marble. And I didn't flinch. Not after the sting, not after the gasps. I stood there, still, chin up, staring into his face like I was seeing him, really seeing him for the first time. This wasn't new. This was just the first time it had an audience. My cheek burned, but my voice steel. Thank you, I said quietly. He blinked, confused, caught. Now everyone knows what I've known my whole life. My brother stood frozen near the cake table. Emily's mouth hung open. No one moved, not even the servers. For once, no one rushed to smooth it over. No one offered me ice or whispered that he didn't mean it. No one tried to escort me out quietly to save the family name, because the shame wasn't mine. It never had been. And then a voice cut through the hush. Miss Carter. Everyone turned. A man in a navy suit stepped forward. Clean cut. Mid-40s. Power posture. I'm sorry to interrupt, he said, addressing the room, but I work with Vanessa. He turned to my father, or rather under her. Whispers erupted. This is Vanessa Carter, founder and CEO of Versa Urban Systems. We are partnering on a sustainable housing initiative. Her work is leading the next wave of green real estate in this city. His voice was clear, respectful, and devastatingly public. She's one of the most brilliant strategists I've met in this industry. Then he turned to me. Are you all right? I nodded. Barely. Good, he said, because you've got a board dinner in 2 days and you're presenting our urban integration strategy. I'll make sure security is present next time. He looked at my father once, then back at me. Take care of yourself, Miss Carter. And just like that, he left, leaving behind a silence louder than any scream. The man in the suit walked out with the same dignity he entered with. And in his wake, a crack spread across the entire illusion of that evening. For years, I'd been the embarrassment. The unmarried daughter, the one who didn't conform, the one who worked too much, talked too directly, and loved her independence more than family approval. But in that moment, as whispers bloomed like wildfire through linen-draped tables and crystal glasses, it was no longer me they were embarrassed for. It was him. My father, Raymond Carter. The man who just slapped his CEO daughter in front of his colleagues' clients and a ballroom full of strangers. I didn't wait for an apology. I didn't wait for someone to tell me I was brave. I simply walked back to my seat, picked up my clutch, and turned toward the door. Vanessa, my mother said, catching my arm. Her voice was low, tight with panic, not concern. Please, stay, for appearances. I looked at her, really looked, not as my mother, but as a woman terrified her carefully curated world was cracking at the edges. You taught me to keep quiet, to keep the family looking good, I said. But I'm done looking good for people who let me be humiliated in private and expected me to smile in public. She let go of my wrist like it burned her. I walked. I didn't cry in the car. I didn't scream or tremble or spiral. I just drove. Back to my penthouse, the one they tried to claim, like it was some trophy of their legacy. The one I bought with sweat and solitude and sleepless nights, no one ever asked about. When I got home, I kicked off my heels, poured myself a glass of water, and stared out the window at the skyline I helped shape. And I whispered out loud to no one. You did good. Just that. 2 words I had once begged to hear. Now I gave them to myself. Over the next few days, the fallout came in waves. The slap made its way into hushed gossip. A bridesmaid had posted a blurry video, just the sound of the impact, and the stunned silence after. No faces. But people knew. Old colleagues of my father stopped returning his calls. A local paper ran a small piece family drama at high society wedding. Nothing detailed, but enough. My inbox, however, was full, not with pity, with respect, with offers, with new partnerships, with messages from women who said I saw the clip. I've been there. Thank you. I didn't respond to all of them, but I read every single one, because I needed to remember what it meant to be seen for something real, not just performed. And then a letter, from my father, typed, short. I regret what happened. I hope we can speak privately sometime. No apology. Just discomfort in a new power dynamic. I folded it, placed it in a drawer. Not out of malice, but because I'd finally learned I didn't owe him healing for wounds he never tried to understand. A week later, I agreed to meet him. Not because I needed to, but because I wanted to see face to face whether he was coming to rebuild or just to reframe the story on his terms. We met at a quiet cafe, neutral territory. Midday light streaming through the windows, soft jazz playing like nothing explosive had ever happened in our lives. He arrived wearing the same watch I remembered as a kid, the one he used to glance at impatiently whenever I spoke too long at dinner. He sat across from me, folding his hands neatly, like he was settling in for a negotiation. You look well, he offered. I am, I replied without smiling. There was a pause, that dance of silence where both parties wait to see who'll surrender their pride first. I've had some time to reflect, he finally said. What happened at the wedding? It wasn't right. I acted out of emotion. You hit me, I said, bluntly, in front of everyone. He flinched but didn't deny it. I was overwhelmed. There was so much pressure. You know how family expectations can get. Stop. He looked up surprised. Don't soften it. Don't pad it. You didn't snap because of stress. You slapped me because I said no. Silence again. His eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but in calculation. You know I've always pushed you because I saw potential. You've exceeded even what I imagined. There it was. The pivot. The attempt to take credit for my success. I didn't succeed because of you, I said. I succeeded in spite of you. His lips tightened, but he kept his voice calm. I just want us to move forward, as a family. Rebuild. Rebuild implies there was something healthy here before. He exhaled slowly. Look, maybe I was hard on you. Maybe I didn't understand your world. But now that you've proven yourself, I don't need to prove anything anymore. That stopped him cold. You only want me close now because other people respect me, because now I'm an asset. He didn't deny it, not outright, and that more than anything told me everything I needed to know. I finished my coffee and stood up. You don't get to rewrite the story now, I said quietly. You were the villain in mine, and I'm finally done editing you into a hero. He looked like he wanted to respond but couldn't find the words. I left him sitting there in that clean cafe in his pressed shirt and polished shoes, surrounded by the empty quiet of a narrative slipping out of his grasp. That evening I went home and stood at the window of my penthouse. The city below shimmered. Somewhere far away, people were telling stories about families and loyalty and success. Mine was no longer fiction. It was freedom. It's been 4 months since the wedding, 3 since the letter, 2 since the cafe. And every day I wake up without waiting for anyone's approval. I don't rehearse imaginary conversations with my father anymore. I don't scan my inbox for apologies I know won't come. I don't shrink when someone calls me ambitious, like it's an insult dressed in a compliment. Because I no longer want to be understood by the people who refused to try. I want to be respected by myself. And I am. My company just closed its Series B round. We're expanding into 2 new cities. People call me visionary. Now the same people who once told me to slow down to settle to be realistic. I remember when my father once said that being powerful would make me unlikable. He was wrong. What made me unlikable in his eyes was never power. It was independence. The refusal to obey. The decision to say no. The courage to keep saying it, even when it cost me love that was only ever conditional. I still hear from my brother sometimes. He sends polite hollow texts. Hope you're doing well. Happy holidays. I answer in kind. There's no war between us, just a silence neither of us has tried to bridge. I don't blame him anymore. He grew up believing he was the center of a family. I grew up learning I had to orbit outside it. But now I've built my own gravity. I've started mentoring young women in my industry. Not just about business, but about boundaries, about ownership, about how to hold power with grace and fire and still get 8 hours of sleep without guilt. I tell them what no one told me. You don't owe loyalty to people who only loved the idea of you being useful. You don't have to burn yourself to keep the family warm. You are not the difficult one for refusing to disappear. Last week, I gave a keynote at a leadership summit. After the applause died down, a woman in her 50s came up to me. Red nails, tired eyes, trembling voice. She said, "My daughter sent me one of your quotes on LinkedIn. I didn't understand it at the time. But now, I think I do. Thank you." I nodded, smiled, said, "Thank you for listening." But inside, I whispered something else to the girl I used to be. You did it. You made it out. You made it through. And you never had to give away your keys to be let in. This is my legacy. Not the house they wanted. Not the name they tried to control. But the space I carved out with bloody hands and steady breath. And in that space, I bloom. Not for them. Not in spite of them. But because I finally became someone who doesn't need to be chosen to know she belongs. Sometimes I still revisit that night in my mind, not to relive the slap, not to taste the humiliation again, but to remind myself that it was the breaking that allowed the light to flood in. People think transformation is cinematic music swells. You walk away empowered and life rearranges itself around your truth. It's not. It's slow, messy, at times painfully silent. It's checking your phone and seeing no missed calls and realizing that peace is louder than noise. It's walking into your own apartment and not looking over your shoulder to wonder who's watching, judging, evaluating. It's making tea in your kitchen barefoot, knowing that you don't have to explain your existence to anyone. It's laughing without worrying if someone thinks your voice is too loud. It's sleeping deeply. It's not rehearsing conversations in your head anymore. It's finally living instead of proving. A few weeks ago, I got another invitation. This time to a gala hosted by a national network for women entrepreneurs. They wanted to honor me. Rising Architect of the Year, they said. Funny how people call you rising when you've been clawing your way up from underneath for years. I stood on that stage in a deep blue dress, hair pulled back, eyes steady. I looked out at the audience, hundreds of people, faces lit with admiration, and I thought, none of these people know about the little girl who once apologized for speaking out of turn at the dinner table. None of them saw me crying in a stairwell after my father told me I was acting hysterical for having boundaries. None of them witnessed the long invisible war I had to wage inside myself to believe I was worthy of anything at all. But I knew, and that was enough. My father hasn't spoken to me since the cafe. I don't expect him to. I think in some way he's still trying to figure out how he raised a woman he couldn't control. A woman who said no. A woman who built something bigger than his ego. And maybe he'll never come around. Maybe he'll keep spinning stories to save his version of reality. That's fine. I'm not in his story anymore. I'm in mine. People often ask me now, what motivates you? They expect me to say ambition, vision, strategy. Sometimes I just smile and answer freedom. Because that's what this has always been about. Not revenge, not vindication. Freedom. The freedom to live without shrinking. The freedom to love yourself without permission. The freedom to say, I'm not here to carry your legacy. I am here to create my own. I used to want an apology. Not anymore. Now I want longevity. I want joy. I want to open doors for people who've been told their voices are too loud, their dreams too big, their independence too threatening. I want to become the kind of woman I once needed. And now, I am. So, no, I didn't give them my penthouse. I gave them something else. A lesson, one they didn't ask for, one they'll never forget. You can slap a daughter in public. You can silence her in private. But one day she will rise. And when she does, she will build a house you'll never be invited into again. Not out of spite, but because healing comes with locks. And peace? Peace comes with keys that no one can steal.